Hello, God bless you. I hope you're doing well today. And actually, as part of intercultural education, it's important to realize that every place has a culture. Now, we think of ethnicity and countries and individuals. Everyone has a culture. And remember, culture is something that is always changing and growing and adapting, and it's varied. It just is always changing. So sometimes a church has its own culture, a university has its own culture, and this is a part of intercultural education, how to interact within any given culture. So we're going to talk today in order to learn a little bit about the culture of a place and the relationship of leadership and the history of a place and how this impacts the culture of a location, the culture of a place. I'm going to teach you some concepts through telling a story about a school. And this school is a boarding school. Now, in the United States, as you know, very, very few people go to boarding school. And there are all kinds of boarding schools. There are, schools that send students to great universities, great colleges. Some are more average. Some are set up to help students maybe with ESL programs, place where if maybe a student wants to go to an American college and they want to get to know English a little better, maybe they'll go to a boarding school and they can interact with people and learn about culture, travel. And so a lot of different reasons people go to boarding school. And this particular boarding school was founded by someone from England, and he was an Anglophile. That means someone who enjoys things from England. So it was kind of based on an English boarding school. So there were prefects, those are student leaders. There was required chapel. School has a dining hall where faculty members lead tables. And this particular school was a smaller school. A lot of land, some beautiful old building as its main place. And the whole culture of the school for students was to prepare for college, okay? But also to develop one's own individualistic ideas. It's a very individualistic school. And this particular school also had assigned seating. So every week you would have to sit where you were assigned. You did not have the freedom to choose which table where you would be sitting. And this was done to avoid cliques. Cliques meaning a group of people, maybe kind of similar, and there was a real desire there for people to learn how to communicate with everyone. So you didn't just sit with your friends. And this was very helpful education, I believe, and very intercultural because you had to find ways to interact with people. And certainly when you're a teenager, sometimes that's hard to do because sometimes you would prefer just to be with your friends and not really go outside your group. So, but it's a good lesson in communication and how to relate to people. And at these dining hall tables, there were teachers who would kind of lead the conversation. So not only were the students interacting with other students, they were really getting to talk to their one of their teachers on more of a social level. So, and in the dining hall, there where everything was served, there was a definite protocol and etiquette. And of course, you had to wear coat and tie, and there were announcements. There, of course, was a prayer. There were flags that represented all the countries that the students came from. Beautiful chandeliers, beautiful lighting fixtures. So it was a very good place to learn about communication. Class dress, as I said, was a coat and tie, and it was very conservative. There was a school ode that people would sing. An ode is, a song in homage to something, and it was sung in Latin, not in English. So, and that certainly gave it a very traditional feel. And actually, the school ode was from the Bible. I lift mine eyes to the hills, where your strength comes from. That Bible verse. In montes ad dominum, I lift eyes to the hills. The Latin is oculos meos levavi in montes ad dominum, which in English, I lift mine eyes to the hills, to the Lord. Dominum, Lord. Okay, and of course that was played to the accompaniment of a piano. There was lots of studying, lots of sports, and of course there were classes on Saturdays. So it was not this. There was a lot of studying that went on. It was founded by a priest in the 1800s, and there was required chapel 5 days a week. Students helped run the school. Students were given leadership positions. They dorm proctors. Everyone contributed to the upkeep of the school. So you would help clean, you would help supervise, you would do everything. They wanted you to be very well-rounded, and you may have come from a very rich family, and maybe you never saw a mop or a broom, but they wanted everyone to experience what it's like to clean. So it really was very good. And there was a social life with other schools and other famous boarding schools, and so that was part of the upbringing. And the student management system was sometimes not always well run, because some students, if they observed another student doing something wrong, they would not want to report it necessarily. And when we look at organizations, if you're in a church, a missions organization, there is a whole thing about followership and leadership. And at HUSAC, followership, in other words, following the rules of the school, was not always happening. So that caused some difficulty. And what we would call the equity regime, which is a legitimate term to describe leadership and followership, there was a situation where there was some anarchy. We would call an anarchy regime. Now, I don't mean this in a political way, but because there was such a respect for individuality, sometimes people would not really totally submit to the group. Now, in sports, there was, of course, a sense of sportsmanship, and that was encouraged. And there were students from many different places, and so there was an opportunity to learn about lots of, different cultural situations usually. The faculty, many of them had gone to Ivy League schools, and there was a big Christmas show that was done there. And this Christmas show was very famous in America, and it had been brought from Queen's College, England, and it was first performed in England in the year 1340. And then it was brought to America, and it was performed at this school, and it's an annual thing, and it's a ritual that's very, very much a part of the school. Uh, the famous graduates of this school were often talked about to affirm uh, the school as being a good place. So a sense of ritual was definitely at work at this school. So there'd be all kinds of ceremonies, like when student leaders were installed, there'd be a ceremony, and and this chart talks about why rituals are important. And there is a organizational theorist by the name of Wildavsky, and he recognized a regime, an organizational style in something called hierarchy. So in other words, at this school there was hierarchy as much as there was individualism. You know, there were leaders, there were followers, which were used for structural reasons. When Bowman and Deal, some other theorists, talk about frameworks, they would say that this was structural. In other words, the hierarchy allowed you to run the school, but it was also very symbolic. So it was wrapped up in tradition. This Christmas show was a big part of the organization, and it brought the community together. It supported equity and people having sort of a similar interest. As a regime, Wildavsky would maybe call it, there was a bit of the slavery mode. Slavery meaning, I don't mean slavery in the usual sense, but people just had to go along with these rituals. It had to happen. So in essence, he calls that a slavery thing. Bowman and Deal would say the framework would involve human resources. In other words, people having their own sort of position in maintaining the ritual. It was also very symbolic. And there were many other traditions, including chapel, and chapel was required, which would be, according to Wildavsky, in the slavery and equity mode. Everyone had to do it, and you had to go. You had no choice. It didn't matter which religion you were a part of. Attendance was taken. Attendance at chapel was absolutely required. So the singing of the school ode, which was from the Bible, I lift mine eyes up into the hills, it did honor the power of God. It brought people together. It was symbolic, and everyone did it. So it kept everything together. I would say that these regimes of the school, the style that Wildavsky and Bowman and Deal have talked about, would be true in any organization, okay? So as we look at these theorists, you could apply their terminology to your organization. Now, when it comes to intercultural communication, intercultural connection, using intercultural in a very broad way, it helps us understand what the school was about. So a lot of schools, churches are almost like a movie set. There are dramaturgical trappings that are a legitimate part of the organization. And that adds to bringing people to the place. Also, this school had a lot of social hierarchy. You had many people from all walks of life there, but it was an expensive school, so most people that went there had to, be fairly well off to allow their children to go there. So there's another theorist called Miller, and he has a whole set of terminologies that would describe uh, different types of leaders. And sometimes in the history of an organization, the type of leader also can have a particular style. Another theorist, which this chart also talks about, has talked about something called cyclical characteristics. So organizations can go through various stages, and some stages are like stage one, very exciting, things are happening. There's a lot of momentum for the organization, but then you get down to stage four, and maybe the organization is not doing well. So, and it could almost be not there anymore. So, there are various stages, and I chronicled these stages of the history of the school, like the style of leadership. Miller, someone who has a vision, might be called a prophet, not in the religious sense of the term. And so the founder of the school was prophet style. Stage one, he's getting things started. Next leader of the school was kind of barbarian. He had a lot of things he needed to go through. Financial issues at the school had all of this stuff that was not easy. So he gradually, the school was like in a period of what some would consider a period of decline. Then another headmaster came, and even though there were challenges, there was a fire at the school, he was able to rebuild. So that section would be barbarian builder, that using Miller's terminology, and Collins' terminology, stage three. So it's starting to come back. So that stage three could be maybe on the upswing, but also could be a period of decline. It depends which direction the school is going in, up or down. Then there was another headmaster, similar barbarian builder. Then a few headmasters came through that were more administrators. So they were kind of strong leaders, strong in the sense of their approach. Then there was another leader who had the style of bureaucrat. Then another leader who didn't really relate, and the school almost closed, and he was more of an aristocrat. That's the term that Miller uses for maybe a leader who is just in his own world and not doing the best he can. School almost closed again. So then an administrator came in, headmaster who had that kind of style, and the school started to come back. So the school still exists, but there have been all these different cycles. And the school is neither top-heavy with direct leadership or predominantly equity-driven. It's leadership, but individualism cohabitating. So that's the way it is. But it's ritual and tradition that keeps the school going. So ritual and tradition, sometimes a school or a church is not doing well, or a missions organization, and it's not doing well. But sometimes just traditions keep it going, like people who have been involved with it. Oh, we have such a great lunch after church. It's really, really good. That kind of thing. Or we've had so many wonderful moksanim in our church. Oh, when we had that moksanim 20 years ago, we still remember him and he was so great. So sometimes the stories and things get related. We have to be careful when we're in organizations to make sure there is substance. That means that there is growth and the mission of the organization is happening. And not just growth, but integrity, honesty, and leadership knowing when it's time to leave, and leadership that knows I need to stay. A good leader has a good plan for the future, to know, not for himself, but for the organization. So I mean, people have their own plans, but so in terms of intercultural education, this is important to know because if you are connected with someone who is a leader or a follower, a big part of organizations, we hear people talk about leaders, but followership is a huge part of it. And there are different kinds of followers. Kelly, another researcher, categorized different types of followers. He talked about this chart explains some of that. He talked, one that is particularly interesting to me is someone called an exemplary follower. An exemplary follower is able to put the best foot forward for the organization. He represents the organization well. He has a good PR sense. He works hard. Then there are other types of followers who are not good followers. They complain. They expect everyone else to do everything. They're not really, they don't do too much. They just want to get something that will bring them something, and they really don't care. So there are different kinds of followers. We are all followers to a great degree, but there are many different kinds of followers. So when we are in an organization, we have to know how to relate to these followers. And if you are in an organization that has an exemplary follower, that's just great. Some of these other types of followers are pragmatic followers, conformist followers, and their style is different. Like the alienated follower I just talked about is the person who basically thinks about himself. He can be troublesome. He can be a complainer. He doesn't utilize his talents very well. The conformist follower, he's glad to do the work. He minimizes conflict. He's gets along with people fairly well. But people look at him and, oh, he doesn't have very many ideas. He doesn't want to have too much discussion. And actually about 20 to 30% of the population fits into this kind of follower. They follow rules and they do good, but if they want to reach a higher level of followership, they need to try to cultivate more independent critical thinking. They need to develop confidence in their ideas and the courage to act on them. And they need to confront fear of conflict and need for structure. Pragmatic follower, that's about 25% to 35% of the population. They look at the politics of an organization, the relationships of leaders. They know how to navigate and strategize. They try to maintain a balance within the organization, and they usually play by the rules and regulations. Some people don't care for this style because they seem like they're playing political games, like with leaders and all of that. They might try to get what they can get for themselves. So a little selfish. But a lot of members of the population are kind of this style. If they want to change to be kind of a better follower in the sense that they're doing more good, they need to have some goals that relate to who they are a little more, and they need to trust others and have more credibility because sometimes they're not trusted as much. Now there are passive followers, and that's about 5 to 10% of the population, and they believe that they should rely on the leader's judgment and thinking, and they only take action when the boss tells them. So that's good. They respect and submit to the boss, but they can't think for themselves. If something happens, they panic. Um, People look upon them as they only put in their time. Uh, they don't do their share. They need too much supervision. They follow the crowd very easily, and if they want to change, they need to uh, be more involved, not just kind of watching and being on the perimeter. And they have to find ways to be a part of the organization more. And then we have what is probably the best kind, if I can say that. I'm not saying other people, are not good followers, or everyone has something to offer. And in God's world, even those people who seem like complainers and are not doing much, I believe that we need to be kind to everyone and try to help people along and help them grow, not criticize. And then we have the exemplary follower, which is highly sought after because she has focus and commitment. She is competent in activities. She increases the value of the organization. Good PR sense. She is able to think of the organization, make a good impression, carry that organization forward. So exemplary follower, EXEMPLARY. Good example of a great follower. This kind of follower can organize team members, create good networks, and are also great leaders. People listen to them. So they're following the organization, but they're also leaders. And they know how to balance both roles. They're very respectful of the leadership, and they represent the organization very well. They don't complain about the organization. They rather find positive things. They can help in meetings and group meetings. They can help the organization, and they would not criticize it. They would usually approach things in a positive way and acknowledge other people and appreciate the efforts. And they are proactive. They gather the information they need. They don't get mad and take a stand and, get mad. If they are concerned about something, they seek other people's advice. What do you think? Should we do that? Is that a good idea? What's your idea? Could you tell me? So there's that kind of a seeking wise counsel, and that's a biblical thing, to seek wise counsel. They usually are strong people. They are not weak. They work within the system. They usually try to have good communication with people. They're good at almost teaching people in their area. So that's very good. And they're able to work with other people to take some kind of action. They usually seek a higher authority, maybe in this case God or Jesus, when they're trying to solve a problem. They seek divine guidance. And sometimes human guidance too. And they're strong and tough in a good way. Their lives are usually in reasonable order, not always perfect, but these exemplary followers are just very crucial to having an organization run well. They do a good job. So we have talked a little bit about one organization. We talked about some cycles, some recognized theoretical cycles in organizations, types of leaders, and sort of the style, the stages that organizations can go through, and we have those charts for you to see. So I think hopefully this will give you an appreciation of this kind of culture that you may find in a church, missions organization, business, just about any organization. And that helps you with your intercultural education because you will understand personalities, You will understand organizations and where they are. And instead of being frustrated about something, you will be able to understand the process and how organizations operate and have many different lives and many different changes. We also talked about followership and the different kinds of followers, which of course are a big part of organizations, right? I mean, people study leadership and that's important, but most people who are involved in an organization, many of them have to be the followers sometimes, but they can also be leaders. So hopefully this has given you an appreciation. And when you look at other cultures and you add this up, sometimes the culture can be a little different and look at things differently. So these theories are just some theories. We cannot use it in every situation, but it gives us something to think about and hopefully use when we are trying to interact and communicate well within any culture that we find ourselves in. So thank you so much, and God bless you, and have a great day. Thank you.